Good day, and welcome to the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas. And I want to thank you for joining me for my weekly look at what's going on with the planets this week, July 26th through August 1st. Sorry I didn't have a show last week. We had a few technical problems. Now, I hope everyone's having a really good summer. It's been extremely hot here in Houston, but really it's only a few degrees above our normal temperature for this time of the year. So it's pretty hard to complain, except that we're not having any rain, and we could certainly use a little bit of that. The astrological group here in Houston, the Houston Astrological Society, will be putting on a one-day conference on August 15th at 2015 on Pluto. The conference will be from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m., and the cost for the all-day event is $25 for members and $50 for non-members. The event will be held on Saturday, August the 15th, 2015, from 9 to 4 p.m. Registration opens at 8:30. It'll be held at the Edgar Cayce Center, or the ARE Center, and that's at 7800 Amelia Road, right off of, and I just forgot the name of the road, but I'll remember it in a minute. Anyway, it's in Houston, and the zip there is 77055. We have 4 speakers talking on 4 different points of view about Pluto and its effect in the astrological chart. It seems to be a really interesting one-day conference, and I hope that some of you will want to come. If you wish to get in contact with me, you can always reach me at LillyRoddyShow@AOL.com. That's my email. LillyRoddyShow.com. That's my website. Or find us on Twitter, Pinterest, or Facebook. And I would recommend this often. We have a lot of great pictures on Pinterest. Please take some time to look at that. Really wonderful pictures of the planets. This next week should continue to be a more peaceful week than we had earlier in the month. And there are actually fewer daily aspects than usual. And when we don't have enough aspects with the moon, her connecting and changing signs, the power of the moon, is really what drives our energy along and powers our agenda. This next week could be a better week to focus on creating a little bit more order in our life, since we won't feel such a big, strong agenda. This week, Venus is retrograde, and what she is demanding is our attention. Venus retrograde is the time when we turn inward to seek our own connection with our own internal goddess. Venus wants to know her more unconscious or emotionally driven side of her nature. Besides being the obvious symbols of love and beauty, Venus is also the darker side of those expressions, from jealousy, anger, hate, possessiveness, and is often usually associated with the 7 deadly sins from the Christian Bible. So during the retrograde period, we are much closer to these more authentic, yet less socially acceptable sides of our personality. Let me say that again. So during the retrograde cycle, we are much closer to these more authentic, yet less socially acceptable sides of our own personality. And with Venus in retrograde, we're going to focus on our own inner child. In a positive way to approach Venus retrograde, this would be a good time to focus in and do really nice things for yourself. Don't be afraid to be your own best support system and your own best partner. Otherwise, your inner child may come across as whiny, and nobody likes that. And if you're lucky during this Venus retrograde, you will find the white knight that lives inside of you, so you won't have to look outside of you for someone to rescue you. Also during this Venus retrograde time, all of us will review our relationships. And with Venus in a fire sign, we're likely to be a lot more outspoken about the areas that we're not comfortable with. And for those that are you that are in a good relationship with Venus retrograde, this is, of course, a good time to renew and review your current partnerships. If you are having problems, Venus retrograde, of course, wants to bring some sort of resolution to that. And then, of course, for those whose relationships are not working despite Venus's effort, those relationships will come to an end. So I would say to you during this, during this Venus retrograde time, it's really important to really pay attention to what you say to the people around you that you consider that you are in some partnership with. And my version of partnerships are relationships that have intimacy that may or may not be sexual. So romantic partners, good friends, and business partners are generally what I associate with relationships. So be careful with what you say. On a larger scale, with this Venus retrograde, I'm also anticipating some sort of legal pushback by the religious right against marriage equality. I would expect some of them to file some sort of briefs, or for us to see some sort of flurry of activity for these groups to try to continue to circumvent the law. And because of that, that would be, again, a natural process with Venus retrograde. It just doesn't mean that it's going to be overturned. And remember that retrograde Venus will be with us through September the 25th. And just as a heads up for that time, we do have a Mercury retrograde from mid-September through mid-October. And that will probably keep the energy sort of sluggish and not moving along as smoothly as I would like until we get to mid-October. So we do have that. So back-to-back, not unusual. And with this upcoming Venus retrograde, it'll be interesting to watch Venus retrograde back through Donald Trump's chart. And yes, Venus retrograde will be moving backwards through his first house and back into his 12th. We will get to see how his relationships, especially the business ones, are affected. And for those Virgo types wanting the info for Donald Trump, it is June 14th, 1946, 9:51 a.m. in Queens, New York. It's a very interesting chart. He has a huge first house Mars in Leo, which is, of course, where we get all of that narcissism and this whole deal with his hair and the Leo mane. I mean, really, we should just have his picture in astrology books for future astrologers. Here is the synecdoche side of Leo. He does have a lot of out-of-bounds planets, and then part of that is why he has such a, I wouldn't call it a sense of self-confidence, as just a sense that he's going to do what he wants. I'm not sure that it's confidence as it's just action. So with that Venus retrograding through his first house, I wonder how all of his relationships will be faring and how that will affect his business. I'm sure that a lot of that will come back to him. But unfortunately, people that have such an extreme narcissism don't really have a sense of empathy, and they don't apologize. They just move on and try to make their same point. And generally, these people are fairly out of touch with other people. Now, that's not to say that his popularity isn't blazing at this particular time. Of course, Jupiter is moving through his first house, and so he's definitely gaining all of that benefit. He will lose some of that as Mars goes direct next month, as Saturn goes direct next month and begins to square some of his oppose and conjunct some of his Gemini and Sag planets. So I think that'll probably calm him down with that Venus retrograde, but it'll be interesting to watch. Also this week, on Sunday, Uranus goes retrograde. Now, all of the outer planets from Jupiter out, meaning Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they all go retrograde every year for about 4 months. So first, it's not unusual that Uranus would be going retrograde, and Uranus will be going direct in the latter part of December of this year. So we're sort of in this retrograde period. Uranus retrograde should encourage each of us to be more socially conscious and to know what freedom means to each one of us. Excuse me. Because the effects of the Uranus retrograde will sort of activate our own inner rebel, and we'll want to be more outspoken about what we really think about. So even though it's Uranus retrograde, we're nevertheless still going to open up about things that are going on inside of us. And we will have a lot of retrograde planets at one time. One of my clients pointed this out to me, or asked a question of me on Facebook. And occasionally we do have a lot of planets retrograde at one time, particularly if we have like Venus or Mercury or Mars, and then we have the outer planets retrograde. It's easy to have 5 or 6 planets retrograde every year. It doesn't necessarily affect us negatively as a day-to-day sort of life experience, but it does indicate that a lot of people would be born with a lot of retrograde planets during that particular time, and retrograde does affect them, and it also affects how we interpret that. So, during this Uranus retrograde, let your inner rebel out. Let her out. On Friday, July 31st, we have our second full moon of the month, which of course means this is a blue moon. The full moon is in Aquarius at 5:43 a.m. here in Houston. The full moon in Aquarius will continue to echo the themes of personal independence and freedom with a strong humanitarian drive. Well, I hope you can enjoy the slower pace of this week. As we start August, our pace will pick back up, and we should have a more active weather month in August as well. So I'm kind of looking for more rain, although I know we haven't had anything like that. Thank you for joining me this week as we looked at July 26th through August 1st, 2015. Join me next week as we look at August 2nd through August 8th, 2015. And as always, this is the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Texas, reminding you to keep those stars in your eyes. Bye-bye. See you next week.